Chilling tales for dark nights.
Want to make sure you never miss a Chilling Tales for Dark Nights video again? Be sure to subscribe and hit that bell to turn on notifications.
Contractions. Written by Kevin David Anderson. Performed by Jason Hill. The day Aaron realized he wanted to eat his children, he knew he'd have to leave. The urges were first revealed in nightmares with gruesome cinematic clarity. A horror show, starring him in a reel of blood and pain. But now the scenes of him feasting on his own offspring ran in high definition in the wake of day. Like the other men before him, it was time to say goodbye before he did something that no man should have to live with. No sane man could live with. "Stay another night," his wife said. "Just one?" Aaron held her boneless hands and pulled her aquatic-looking limbs around him. Tears streaked her pale cheeks. "Heather, you know that I can't." He brushed a wisp of hair from her face and felt the strength of her new limbs encircling him. Like other women in town, Heather's arms had transformed. Seemingly overnight, human skin and fingers had given way to tentacles that could stretch far beyond their length. Just how far, no one really knew. But yesterday, she had closed the front gate outlining their property without leaving the porch. "I would stop you," she said, if you tried to hurt the children." "Please don't make this harder than it is," Aaron whispered. "I got the urges, and I can't stay." Heather's arms held him in place like pythons, constricting, suffocating. Her cheek nuzzled the silver memento around Aaron's neck, a modest cross. She pulled back slightly. "I can't understand why you wear this. You don't even believe." "You gave it to me," Aaron said. "That's reason enough." She looked up into Aaron's eyes. "I don't want you to be alone when it happens. No one should be alone." Aaron touched the cross with his fingertips. "I won't be," he said. "Iggy Patel is going with me." Heather almost laughed. "Iggy Pat? You don't even like him." Aaron chuckled and rested his forehead on hers. "Actually, I hate his guts." They both laughed. "Take care of our girls," he whispered. He said this knowing she would slay anyone that came near. "And if you see me again, you know what must be done." She nodded, closed her eyes, and released her husband of 15 years. Aaron picked up his pack and shotgun, stepped off the porch his grandfather had built, and began walking, never looking back. As he passed through the front gate, he held an image of his family framed in his mind. His 4 girls, all sandy blonde peppered with cinnamon freckles, standing around their mother. He preferred to picture Heather the day he first met her, stepping off a bus from Baltimore, lost, broke, and easily the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. But her new, end-of-the-world self just kept creeping back in. When Aaron first saw her arms were transforming, he knew what it meant. It had been happening all over town. Mothers went through the change just a few days before fathers began to get the insatiable hunger, the uncontrollable desire to eat children. The best Aaron could figure was that it was Mother Nature's way of striking some kind of insane balance in this chaotically shifting world. Thankful, at least, that enough was now known that he could avoid the fate of so many other families in the county, mothers clashing with fathers in an unholy custody battle. When a mother won, a father lay on the ground, often without a head. But when the father won, and the kids were not able to get away, then everybody died. And not quickly. It should have seemed horrific, Aaron knew. The idea of eating his children, his own children. But it wasn't. And it terrified him. So much had changed in the last 2 months since the universe had stopped growing. No, that wasn't what they were calling it. Expanding, he remembered. At first, it was believed that the global changes were the result of an industrial accident in space. But no amount of orbiting toxins could account for the fact that rocks now sometimes exploded. Rabbits gathered in ferocious, carnivorous packs. And the color yellow was now incredibly painful to touch. The last scientific expert Aaron saw on CNN before all broadcasts stopped claimed the universe was now snapping back, contracting. And the laws of physics, laws that once made the world a place of reason and understanding, were now mere suggestions that nature could ignore as it saw fit. It was as good an explanation as any, Aaron had thought at the time, while watching the scientist illustrate his theory with an elaborate equation that he didn't really have the remotest chance of understanding. But deep down, he knew nobody really had a clue as to why it was all coming to this strange end. To his mind, a physics equation couldn't explain why the trees all lived underground now, or why the clouds had decided to hunt and feed on airplanes. Iggy signaled Aaron with a gentle wave as they met up on the edge of town, neither saying more than 2 words to one another before heading out. Aaron stayed a good 10 paces behind Iggy, hoping that the distance would discourage any notion Iggy might be entertaining of starting a conversation. He had nothing to say to Iggy, and he hoped to God Iggy didn't have anything to say to him. By mid-afternoon, Aaron could smell Iggy's physical effort wafting back to him on the trail. It curled his nostrils, and he lingered farther back. There wasn't much else to compete with the odor. Flowers no longer bloomed, and the fresh air just didn't seem so fresh anymore. Staleness rode the breeze, bringing with it the gentle reminder that it was all just winding down. Aaron was thinking about tying a bandana around his face to mask Iggy's stench when he felt the contraction coming. Just a trembling in his bowels at first, but within a few seconds the entire planet vibrated. When a contraction came, there were 2 choices. Hold on to something solid, try to remain standing, or lie down flat on your back, eyes toward the heavens, and just pray that God still gives a shit. Letting his pack fall to the ground, Aaron dropped fast. He pressed his hands flat, palms down into the dirt, and held his breath. His guts ached. Gas expanded inside him, and he felt like his head would pop. He fought against his fear to keep his eyes open. If this was it, the last and final one, then Aaron wanted to see it. Face it. Gaze down its gullet and maybe, just maybe, catch a glimpse of what would come next. The afternoon sky folded in on itself to the relentless pounding of thunder. Clouds appeared, then vanished in the span of a moment, and just when Aaron thought it was over, then came the pressure. Like weights pressing down on his body, a jolting acceleration, the entire planet becoming a roller coaster, plunging downward, banking hard to the right, then snapping back harder to the left. Stomach acid burned the back of Aaron's throat. His eyeballs grew heavy. The vibrations in his skull seemed to be trying to shake away the memory of all that he held dear. Who he was, the girls, Heather, and then, as quickly as the contraction came, it vanished. With a suddenness that almost lifted him into a seated position. He exhaled fast, vomiting a little, and then he rolled over on his side. After wiping his mouth, he looked over for Iggy. The grass and weeds were about 2 feet high, and if Iggy had hit the dirt, he was obscured. Hey. Hey, Ig, Aaron called out. You still with me? A quiet second passed before Aaron saw Iggy's hand rise up over the crest of the grass, delivering a very enthusiastic thumbs up. Oh, am I crazy? Or are those getting worse? Iggy said, his voice somewhat muffled by the grass. Aaron pushed himself up and wrapped his arms around his knees. No, I don't think that was any worse than this morning. But Aaron didn't really believe that. Dealing with 4 young girls, he had become accustomed to downplaying almost anything put in front of him as a means of comfort. It had worked, for a while. But then the contractions came. At least that's what a physicist at some university Aaron had never heard of had decided to call them. Some other scientist had tried calling them celestial gravitational subsonic inversions, but the name just didn't stick. But whatever they were called, they were definitely getting worse. No contraction had ever produced vomit from him before. And although the pressure was always there, that last one felt like an elephant squatting on his chest. No, I disagree, Iggy said, beginning to stand. I definitely think that they are getting worse. He picked up his pack. I just wish that I knew why. Iggy was like that. Aaron remembered him from high school, always asking questions, always wanting to understand. But trying to understand the physics of the end of the world was like trying to understand why the left sock always disappeared from the dryer. No one was ever going to truly understand why cars now drove themselves or why mountains disappeared in the night. The end of the world had its own understanding. Iggy was nearly to his feet when he suddenly froze, eyes forward. Aaron tried to find what Iggy was locked onto, but he saw nothing. A few still beats passed. Aaron held his breath. Then Iggy craned his head back, making several quick hand gestures. They hadn't worked any signals out beforehand, but it didn't take a codebreaker to surmise what Iggy was saying. Aaron got the message crystal clear. They had company. With the ears of an experienced hunter, Aaron turned into the sounds. There were at least 2 different approach patterns, one to the right, the other dead ahead. Iggy gestured, identifying what kind of creatures were about to strike. He wiggled his fingers and forearm, mimicking the motions of a snake. The ones that slither, Aaron thought to himself. He gripped his gun, scanned, and tried not to breathe. The former mammals that had lost most of their bones usually hunted in pairs. Attacking so fast, victims rarely had the opportunity to scream before being swallowed alive. Aaron motioned back for Iggy to draw a bead on the one in front while he targeted the one on the right. He had just gotten his gun up and checked the sights when the tall grass moved. Flecks of auburn hair weaved in the fading sunlight, then dove like a sea serpent moving across the ocean's surface. Aaron followed the bending grass, trying to find an opening. He soon realized that if he waited for a clear shot, it would be on him before he got a chance to fire. Narrowing his gaze, he anticipated the thing's route and took aim. Aaron held his breath, but before he pulled the trigger, it slithered into an opening. He saw its face, mouth open, teeth bent outward, hair flapping around its scalp like alien tendrils. Glimpsing a white patch of skin making up the nape of its neck, he fired. He rocked back from the recoil, placing a hand behind him for balance. The beast's forward progress had been halted, but it would not lie still. Blood sprayed up like a broken sprinkler as its deformed mass thrashed in the grass. Aaron heard Iggy's rifle fire, then the fast sound of the bolt being pulled back and slamming back again. Aaron got to his feet and saw Iggy fire again. The thing was hit, but it still charged.
God damn it, Iggy, pull back!
Aaron screamed, running forward, raising his gun. The thing and Iggy were so close, Aaron didn't have a clear shot.
Iggy, get down!
Aaron ordered, heart pounding, but Iggy held his ground, slammed the bolt forward again, and fired. The shell casing almost hit Aaron as he arrived at Iggy's side, shotgun poised to fire. Both men held, still waiting for the result of Iggy's last shot. A hissing moan rose from the grass. Then, something large and furry flopped over, tail twitching, lungs gasping. And then it lay still. Aaron let out a long, hot breath as he knelt, his weight coming down much harder than he'd intended. He looked over at Iggy, whose eyes were huge white spheres against the backdrop of his dark olive skin. You... Aaron started, then decided to take a few more breaths before attempting speech again. You all right? I think... Iggy looked down. I think that I may need to change my shorts. Well, damn, that sure as hell ain't gonna make you smell any better. Iggy smiled, and then laughed. Aaron reached for Iggy's rifle. Let me see this relic. Aaron sized up Iggy's old firearm. Jesus Christ, Ig. If I'd known you were gonna cover my ass with a BB gun, I'd have grabbed my kid's slingshot. It's a family heirloom. Well, your heirloom just about ended you. Next time, why don't you just try harsh language? Iggy snatched his weapon, feigning an insulted look. Okay, great white hunter. How'd you do? Nearly took its head off, Aaron said, but remembered the thing still thrashing in the grass. He put a hand on Iggy's shoulder, pushing himself up. Guess I'd better go check. With his muzzle trained, he returned to his firing position. Then he stepped over to where the blood had redecorated the grassy landscape. The thrashing had stopped, and only the breeze hinted at the movement. Auburn hair fluttered under the weight of blood and pieces of scalp liberated from the young woman's head by a shotgun blast. Aaron pushed the head over with his muzzle, allowing its dead eyes to stare skyward. Scarcely discernible as human, the eyes had been pulled around to the side of its head, like a bird or reptile. Dropping to a knee, Aaron tried to guess how young she must have been when it happened. 15. Probably not a day more, he decided. The common wisdom about this phenomenon was that it not only happened across species, but also seemed to occur in adolescent offspring. Teenagers. The first one Aaron had killed still had the headphones from some device wrapped around its body and boneless neck. Oh, hell, Iggy said. I think that's Gail Mitchner's kid. Aaron didn't answer. Iggy must have thought he didn't remember. You know, Iggy continued, Gail Anderson in high school. But Aaron did remember. He'd been seeing her off and on about the same time he started dating his future wife. Certainly not his proudest moment. She married that drifter suddenly. You remember? Aaron nodded, hoping that would be enough for Iggy to drop it. His chest tightened and acid burned his throat as the history he denied himself came flooding back. He had broken it off with Gail after falling for Heather. A few weeks later, Gail was showing early signs of motherhood under her waitress uniform. Then, almost overnight, she was married and picking out baby names. Gail never said Aaron was the father, but she never said he wasn't, mostly because he didn't ask. Aaron closed his eyes. He didn't want to see how much the auburn hair clinging to frayed pieces of scalp lying in blood-spattered grass was the same shade as the locks of his 4 girls. Iggy shouldered his weapon. Didn't you used to go out with Gail? You know, way back when? Aaron took a deep breath, tried to ignore Iggy. Lots of people used to say the Michener guy wasn't the father. Jesus fucking Christ, Ig. Aaron snapped. What are you, in a goddamn sewing circle? Iggy fell quiet and bent back a little. Aaron turned away. Come on. I want a few miles between us and this mess before dark. I'll take point. They walked in silence until Aaron's feet began to hurt. The sun started to set in the north this evening, and there just wasn't enough twilight left to gather wood for a fire. Making camp at the top of a hill, deep in the woods, the only sign of civilization was a fairly large farmhouse nestled a good half-mile away. Spying it through his binoculars, Aaron could see it was occupied. At least 2 adults. There was a child's swing set in the backyard. Knowing that Iggy's cannibalistic urges had started a few nights before his own, Aaron decided to keep that detail about the swing to himself. Both men sat down on opposite sides of the fire, pulled out sandwiches their respective wives had prepared, and started to eat in silence. After a few bites, Aaron started to feel bad about snapping at Iggy, and since they were going to be each other's only company for the next 2 days, he thought he'd try to smooth things out. Lake Placid, the place where the men in the county had collectively decided to gather when the urges struck them, was a long and hard hike. Even though he didn't care much for Iggy, they needed to work together to make the journey. So, Ig, have you heard anything from your part of the world? Iggy swallowed, then frowned. This is my part of the world. We were born in the same town, you redneck jackass. Aaron sighed and forced himself not to reply with an insult. You know what I mean. Anything from a relative back in India or something. We haven't heard anything in a week, Iggy said. Before Skype went down, my mom's sister said that the birds were turning into dinosaurs. Iggy shook his head. Most of Asia went quiet after that. Aaron had no idea what birds had to do with dinosaurs, but wasn't really interested enough to ask. He took another bite and spoke from the corner of his mouth. So, you, believe what they say? Who? The scientists. You know, the ones that say the universe is done expanding and whatnot. That these earthquakes are really interstellar contractions. The universe collapsing back in on itself. Iggy shook his head. There will always be those that must find a logical and rational explanation for everything. I don't think anyone will ever know. What about you? You'll buy into this scientific explanation of the end of everything? Aaron scoffed. Doesn't really sound all that Christian to me. So, what do you think? Iggy said, lowering his sandwich. Oh, hell, I don't know, Ig. Maybe God's just tired. Tired of sorting it all out. Tired of keeping the devil in the box. Tired of separating heaven and hell. Aaron sighed deeply. Maybe he just decided to let the little bastard have it all. They sat quiet for a few minutes, both men chewing slowly and staring into the fire. Images from the last few weeks ran through Aaron's mind. A jetliner that had turned to liquid over Main Street. The shrieks of a teenager as her body transformed into a slithering nightmare. And the screams. The screams of children watching their desperate parents duel. Aaron shook his head. I'm sorry to bring the party down, Ig. Whatever happens, however this all ends, I'm sure we'll be in heaven soon enough. Reunited with loved ones. Last night I tried to eat my son, Iggy said sharply, tears welling in his eyes. What makes you think that there is a place for me in heaven? My God. Egg, when my wife heard our child's screams, she stopped me before I killed him, but the boy will never walk again. Aaron didn't know what to say. He just sat still, trying not to imagine the scene. Not sure why she didn't kill me. By God, I do wish that she had. Neither spoke for several minutes, both listening to the crackling fire. Finally, Aaron broke the silence. It wasn't your fault, Egg. Iggy smiled, wiped the tears that had not yet fallen. In any case, my friend, there is no heaven for me. Even if I am forgiven, I can never forgive myself. Aaron was desperate to change the subject, or at least lighten the mood. Anything to chase the image of Iggy feasting on his boy's legs from his mind. He picked up some wood and fed the fire, which didn't need feeding. So, what does Allah have to say about all this? Iggy smirked and shook his head. Such a fucking redneck. I am not Muslim. Aaron chuckled. Okay, how about the Buddha then? Iggy rolled his eyes. I am Hindi. Aaron shrugged. Well, that still doesn't clear much up for me. No kidding. Iggy put down the balance of his sandwich in order to use both hands as he continued. My religion has many stories of the end of days, via Kali and Shiva. But I think they are just stories. As this world is just a dream. A bit of a nightmare at the moment, really. World's a dream? Aaron said. Iggy looked across the fire intently. Vishnu is dreaming this world. And when he wakes, it will all be gone. That's a beautiful thought, Egg. You and your wife tell your kids that story before they go to bed? My children prefer Harry Potter. But I do think there is some truth in the story of Vishnu. Oh, well, do tell. I think what our world is experiencing is merely the changing of the dreams. As one dream dies, Vishnu will give birth to another. Aaron was quiet for a moment, wondering how seriously Iggy believed that. He looked across the fire and saw Iggy trying to hide a smirk, and then the two men both broke out laughing. Aaron chucked his stick into the fire. Did a nifty, snake-charming voodoo whistle come with that religion of yours? Not exactly, Iggy said. Glow-in-the-dark decoder ring, shaped like Gandhi's bald head. Very nice. A gunshot echoed in the trees. Aaron jumped to his feet, instinctively grabbing his gun. Iggy got up a bit slower, and they stared at one another across the fire. A second. Then a third shot rang out. Where's it coming from? Iggy said, but Aaron was already moving in the direction of the shots, now accompanied by distant screams. Iggy was on his heels and nearly collided with him as Aaron stopped to look down at the farmhouse. Every light in the house was on. There was movement on the porch and billows of smoke drifting over the yard from the shotgun blasts. Aaron took a step down the hill but felt Iggy's hand on his shoulder. You can't go down there. You know what's happening. Aaron took his binoculars off his hip and brought them up. He did know what was happening, but still felt a perverse desire to see. Through the magnified lens, he saw the front door fly open so hard the screen was knocked off its frame. A heavy-set woman stumbled through the opening, her appendage transformation clearly visible. One tentacle dragged on the ground behind her like a tail, tattered and torn, while the other snaked across the porch. A blast from inside rang out and she fell forward, down the steps into the yard. She scurried in the grass, trying to regain her feet. Aaron lowered the binoculars just as something caught his attention. Two kids, A boy of 10 years and a little girl not yet half that ran into the night, toward the swing set in the backyard. "Shit," Aaron said. "Stay here, Egg."
Why? If you're going, I could help.
Without thinking, Aaron swung around, instinctively leveling his gun at Iggy's chest. "You know why." Iggy took a step back and narrowed his gaze. In an instant, Aaron knew that any trust or camaraderie they had built had been destroyed in the span of a gesture. Iggy held up his hands. "Fine. Go." Aaron didn't hesitate. He spun around and charged down the hill. A former high school running back, he still had the speed of an 18-year-old, but lacked the endurance. By the time he neared the farmhouse, his lungs were burning and he gasped for air. As he entered the yard, a man limped on the porch, using a rifle as a crutch to support a grotesquely broken leg. He shambled to the wooden steps. Aaron locked eyes with the man for a moment, but the man had no interest in him. He limped down the steps and moved toward the spot his wife had fallen, gun raised. Something slithered in the grass, and moonlight glinted off a long tentacle as it emerged from the darkness and coiled around the man's broken leg. He screamed, then aimed at some unseen target and fired. The shot found its mark, and the woman rose from the grass, then dropped back to the ground. She twisted like dying roadkill. Her spine was completely blown out. Staggering, the man hobbled over to the woman, reloading his weapon as he moved. Aaron didn't have time to call out and try to reason with the man. He got as close as he dared, steadied his aim, and fired. Hit straight through the chest, the man fell back, crimson spraying the porch. Aaron moved forward, cautiously, and then stood over the man. Aaron's aim had put one near his heart, but to his amazement, the dying man started to rise. Aaron swung the butt of his gun at the man's face, connecting just below the jaw. He hadn't meant to swing that hard, but the adrenaline had consumed him. He heard the jawbone break and teeth flew out, disappearing into the grass. The man slumped into a motionless pile of ragged clothes, blood, and broken bones. A gurgling rose up behind him. Aaron knelt down next to the woman, her only functioning tentacle flopping in the grass like a fresh catch suffocating on the deck of a fishing boat. The light was fading in her weary eyes, and Aaron gazed deep, looking for any sign of lingering humanity. But all he saw was the raw instinct that fired a mother to protect her offspring. Primal instinct. Animal instinct. My God, he thought. Is this what Heather is now? For a moment, he was glad he wasn't with her. He could never bear to see her become this. She continued, tears of red lining her cheeks. Aaron got to his feet, preparing to use his next shot to put this animal down. He had just leveled the muzzle at her forehead when a scream came from the backyard. A child's scream. Aaron bolted around the house. He still hadn't caught his breath from his sprint, but managed to reach the backyard in a few seconds. He followed the screams, now high-pitched shrieks of terror. The children had taken refuge in a homemade fort of plywood, but their wooden haven was under attack. Iggy had a hold of the older boy's leg and was pulling him free of the fort. The little girl screamed as Iggy brought his teeth down on the boy's foot.
Iggy, stop!
Aaron shouted, bringing the rifle up. Stopped for a moment, Iggy met Aaron's eyes. I'm sorry, but I cannot wait. Oh, Aaron, you need to try this. It just feels right. Like the woman in the front yard, there was nothing human in his eyes anymore. Just instinct. Just animal. Aaron pulled the trigger. Iggy fell back into darkness, blown off his feet and into the shadows. The boy recoiled as crimson spray colored his foot. Stepping fast, Aaron checked to make sure Iggy wasn't getting up again. He wouldn't. The shot was straight through the heart, and Aaron was relieved he wouldn't have to look him in the face and finish him. He knelt down and closed the dead man's eyes. Aaron turned and saw the boy getting to his feet. "It's all right now, kid. Get away from me," the boy shouted, fear visibly rippling in his body. No, I ain't gonna hurt you, kid," Aaron said. "Daddy," the little girl said as she bolted out from the fort and into Aaron's arms. Aaron let his gun fall in order to embrace the girl. "Carrie, that's not Dad!" the boy shouted. "Get away from him!" Aaron could feel the child trembling, and he rubbed her back softly. "Is your name Carrie?" She looked up at him with tear-streaked eyes and nodded. "Well, I have a little girl named Carrie," Aaron smiled. "She's a little older, but..." Aaron inhaled deeply. "She smells just like you." The images of his girls flooded in his mind. The way they talked, the way they moved, the sound of their laughter echoed in his memory. "Just like you," he said. He brushed her hair with his hand, which seemed to calm her. Calm her in a way it did a chicken, right before lopping its head off. There. No more tears." Aaron was surprised at how soothing his voice had become. And then he had an outlandish thought. An alien idea at first, but it also made a strange kind of sense. He speculated as to how much pressure it took to bite through a child's skull. Could he do it in one try? Or would he have to gnaw at it like a dog chewing a bone? Maybe, if he could just get the angle right.
Get away from her!
Came a voice far outside his thoughts. He felt something strike the side of his head, and as he fell back, he saw the silhouette of a boy swinging his gun. With his back flat on the ground, Aaron felt it first. The earth was beginning to shake. Another contraction was coming. Looking up at the stars, now tracers of dotted light, he shouted.
"Kids, get down!"
He couldn't see if they obeyed as the bone-breaking pressure came much, much faster this time. Heavy and violent. He tried to turn his head, but the blow to his skull sent pain down his neck. With his gaze locked straight up, he had a spectacular panoramic view of a once-in-a-trillion millennium event blossoming directly overhead. The blurry lines of stars winked out like dying light bulbs in a distant and unreadable marquee. Then, very thin at first, a glowing line bisected the night sky, dilating as it stretched across and beyond Aaron's vision. The Milky Way-sized fissure began to open, ripping the heavens in half. Aaron peered into the chasm, unable to move, unable to blink, and saw all the way back to the beginning of everything, gestating in a passageway that was impossible to know. But deep down, in every cell, every atom that comprised his insignificance, he did know it. Aaron had stood by and watched hundreds of domesticated animals come into this world, held his wife's hand as she delivered their 4 children. Aaron knew a birth canal when he saw one. The earth pressing his back became less violent, as if the part of the planet he was on had detached from the rest. The air was thin. He gasped for each breath, and his lungs began to ache. Still unable to blink, and not really wanting to, he watched as the remaining stars fell into the enormous opening above, like marbles rolling off an uneven table. Summoning up the last vestige of control he had over his body, he brought a hand up to his chest and dug under his shirt, grasping the cross Heather had given him. It offered no comfort. It offered no understanding. Only the memory of her and his girls. He clutched so tight the silver edges cut into his skin. And then from above, something began to emerge. Forcing its way through, it pushed, tearing at the boundaries of the canal, destroying the passage as it came into being. It was fire and ice, the beginning and the end, all things and nothing, and it exploded into existence with a shriek of pain and cosmic awareness. It was the end of one dream, and the beginning of the next. Aaron laughed, not because he found anything funny, but because he had a glint of understanding now. Not much, but it was enough. "Congratulations," Aaron whispered, squeezing the cross with all the strength that remained to him. "It's a universe."
Chilling tales for dark nights.